I want to transport you back in time as I read these memories of long ago, written by my great-grandmother, Orda Simmons, with an introduction written by my grandfather, Dr. Lloyd R. Simmons. My grandfather wrote, "Several years before my mother's death, I urged her to put down in writing some of the salient facts, customs, and times that characterized her family life as she grew up in western rural Kentucky. Hers was a long and active life that reached back well beyond the turn of the century, and I felt that an account of it would be of interest to her relatives and friends, if not to others. Mother acceded to my wishes and began to write. Personal responsibilities bore in on me, and Mother's writing project slipped my mind. On August the 2nd, 1984, Mother was called home to be with the Lord at age 96 plus. I remembered the writing that I had asked her to do and wondered about it. Across the years, she had stored memorabilia such as old letters, clippings, family photographs, snapshots, and other keepsakes in her cedar chest. It was many months after her departure before I felt emotionally up to the task of delving into that chest. When I did, I was delighted to find many things of interest to me, including a sheaf of some 16 pages of autobiographical material in her handwriting. To me, it is a pure treasure, and I have hereinafter reproduced it exactly as my mother wrote it, even to her own quaint spelling. I earnestly hope that those into whose hands these memories of long ago shall come will also treasure them. Her loving son, Lloyd Raymond Simmons." And now I'll read my great-grandmother's memories. I was born on March the 14th, 1888 in Graves County, Kentucky, to very poor farmer parents. We had very little of this world's goods, but were rich in ways that perhaps it takes a lifetime to understand. We were 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. All the children were born at home. Doctors were scarce, and hospitals were almost unheard of. We never owned a farm, we were sharecroppers. My father was a hard-working farmer who plowed the fields with hand plows and a mule. My mother raised a big vegetable garden. The only reason we had food was because we planted and raised it. There was corn, beans, peas, Irish potatoes, sweet potatoes, turnips, tomatoes, also cucumbers, squash, cantaloupes, watermelons, apples, and peaches too. Food was stored in the winter months in cellars and mounds of dirt. What clothing we had was made by hand, mostly at night and by help from neighbors and friends. Also, our stockings and socks were knitted by hand after our mother carded the wool and made it into thread. I learned early to knit, and it's been a wonderful pleasure. Also, since I can remember, it's been such a pleasure to sew peace quilts. They were needed. The nights were cold, cold. We had terrible cold winters in those days. Snow would be 3 and sometimes 4 feet deep. The trees would look like fairyland, with great icicles hanging from the trees and from the eaves of the houses nearly all winter long. Schooling was just a little red schoolhouse with only one room that had a big pot-bellied stove. All classes were in there from beginners to the 6th grade. The schoolhouse was 2 or 3 miles away from where we lived, and the only transportation we had was walking. We had to leave home early to be on time for that little school bell. Walking through the deep snow was fun for us. We were all healthy and hardy girls and boys. But sometimes the ice and snow was so thick it was a problem to get back and forth to school. Consequently, our education was very limited. For entertainment, we had pea shellings. All the neighbors would come in after supper and help us shell peas. Or corn husking. My dad and brother would cut and shuck the corn. We would pull fodder and husks in great mounds and shocks. They were to be stored for horses and cows in winter. On beautiful moonlit nights, a bunch of young people and neighbors would come. We had corn poppings and played games. We children each worked just like the grown folks did. My work was usually to take care of my baby brother, or to watch the horses to keep them out of the cornfields, since fences were scarce. About all we had in those days were rail fences, and most inexcisable horse who pushed them over. We owned a beautiful white Morgan horse, gentle and sensible. His back was wide and soft, almost like a bed. I don't remember how I mounted upon that back, but I did, and I would ride him home from the field, which was quite a long way to walk. At least I thought so. When I was a little older, my mother would let me go and stay with neighbors to help. I remember they had a big garden close to their house with lots of berries, dewberries, big, black, juicy berries. I would pick them and make pies. We had only a Roman Catholic church in our community, but my mother was a Methodist. Once in a while, we would go to a Methodist church miles and miles from our home. The only transportation we had was a big 2-horse wagon. The bed was big enough to hold several children. It was full of hay with quilts spread over it. We would all ride on the hay and be asleep when we got home at night. Did you ever sleep at the foot of the bed? I have many times. Our house was small and not enough beds for so many kids, but we made do and had many blessings we didn't understand at that time. My oldest sister, Pearl, married a merchant man. We owned and ran a general store, sold everything except brick houses. At least we country folks thought so. We sold pickles out of a barrel. Crackers came in barrels also in those days, at about 5 inches square. Candy in those days was made in long, beautiful sticks, different colors and flavors, and displayed in glass jars on shelves right in front of our eyes. I used to just stand and look. My, it looked good. As I grew older, I went to Paducah to help a family with 2 precious little children. I also did housework, cleaning, and cooking. Later, I found work in a knitting factory. We were paid by the piece. The faster you could work, the more money you received. I worked for a seamstress and then the telephone company. I was just a young country girl, I believe around 16 or 17 years old. Now and then, I would go to a band concert at a little park close to Paducah, and there I met a young man, George Orda Simmons, just 2 years older than I. Usually, he had 2 of his sisters with him. They were all dancers, especially him. He and I became friends and going out together. Eventually, when I was 19 and he 21, we were married at Jonesboro, Illinois, where he was employed by the IC Railroad Company. The year was July 6, 1907. That being 75 years ago, I can't believe myself. We came back to Paducah and rented a small 4-room house. I believe they were called shotgun houses then, one room behind the other. On June the 14th, 1908, our first child, Deward, was born. He weighed a few ounces over 8 pounds, the Simmons' first grandchild. They were all so thrilled over the little baby. Olga's youngest sisters were mere babes themselves. They would sit outside in a row and talk about that real live baby. I can see them yet. My, how fast the years have passed. Then 1 year, 11 months, and a few days later, Lloyd was born. He weighed around 9 pounds and was fat and heavy. My great-grandmother wrote much more about her life. She wrote, my father's name was Monroe Lewis and mother's name was Anne Elizabeth. I didn't know until I read her memoirs that my mom, Elizabeth Ann, was named after her mother, Anne Elizabeth. I hope these memories transported you for a moment to life in the late 1800s and early 1900s. I also hope that you will see how wonderful and valuable your own story is, and that you've been inspired to write some of your own life's memories.